Welcome to Refinery Injury Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Refinery Injury Podcast with Brooks Harrison. Brooks is a Texas trial attorney dedicated to representing refinery and plant workers who suffer catastrophic injuries in explosions, fires, and chemical accidents across the South. I'm Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're talking about the long-term physical, emotional, and financial toll that refinery accidents leave on workers and their families. Brooks, good to have you back.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Good to be here.
What kinds of situations or conditions does the term catastrophic injury usually describe within refinery accidents?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind to most folks that work and live around the refinery world is a wrongful death situation, a fatality. A death is usually what is thought of as a catastrophic situation in that sphere. But there are also many other catastrophic injuries that occur out at refineries outside of wrongful death. I mean, you have loss of limbs, you have loss of sight, you have exposures that cause neuromuscular disorders. I mean, the whole list. And if you ask every one of those injured workers that have fallen prey to that, they and their families would probably tell you how catastrophic that was as well. And catastrophe hits us all a little bit differently, but there's nothing as final as a wrongful death case. And wrongful death cases are generally complex, and nobody on the other side ever wants to admit that, yeah, we killed somebody. And that's understandable, but it may be wrong, but it's understandable. And that is our job is to hold folks accountable and to go get justice for our clients.
As far as the physical and mental effects an injury can have, how soon do the full effects show up in someone after a major injury or explosion, a fire, or whatever?
Well, obviously, in wrongful death claims, all that pain is going to be found within the loved ones and the family and those that cared about that individual. In most other incidents, it depends on whether or not we're talking about exposure type cases, which sometimes have latency periods of 30 plus years. And so you just don't know. And that's why I do have clients that have exposures. They come to me. They may not have a claim right now, but by coming to us, they do get to get checked out. There is a medical record created. And that way, 30 years down the road, they will actually be able to have proof that, yeah, I have proof of an exposure from that time period, from that locality. So it's kind of an insurance for them to be able to come back and do that. Now, in acute cases like getting a piece of your head clunked off or other forms of injuries, those are obviously more acute and those are immediate. And that's where you end up under a doctor's care in a hospital, and you go through your due course of treatment and hopefully coming out the other side as good as you were before it all happened.
When one of your clients, realizes they may never return to the same kind of job again, how do they react? What kind of adjustments will they face?
Well, it's completely life altering, and it's life altering in the sense that for two reasons. It's a lot of their manhood and their entire life is built into their job. They will never be able to probably do that type of job again. And then sometimes a bigger consequence of that is usually they're not going to make as much money doing something else as what they were doing when they were injured.
Mm-hmm.
And they pay well out at the refineries. Even the contractors get paid pretty well. So that risk brings up the pay, but it also whenever that risk becomes reality and that pay is not there, and then you're then forced to go do something and work for pennies on the dollar compared to what you used to work. It's not just a physical injury, that's the emotional pain and terror that goes through these workers as well. Not being able to take care of their family. Me personally, I could not imagine not being able to take care of my family.
Hmm.
So I truly get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way. You mentioned how these injuries don't just affect the worker; they impact the whole household. You know, whether or not the catastrophe is fatal or not. When you watch how families cope with sudden changes in income, stress, and day to day life, what do you generally observe as their biggest challenges?
I mean, in the wrongful death sphere, losing the patriarch of the family, losing the breadwinner of the family, losing the essentially the glue guy that kept everybody together and everything together. Um, I've seen cases where it completely destroyed a family, and I've seen other cases where it's essentially strengthened the family, and other folks will step up. And so that really goes back to the integrity and the foundation of that particular family. And but in other times, I mean, we've had multiple clients that really didn't have much family, and in those cases, um, I recognize that, and so does my staff, and so does the office, and so we make sure that we go and drop off and spend time at the hospital, and we make sure they get to their doctor's appointments. We do that for everybody, but especially with folks that don't have those resources around, we try to step up and be that family for them, especially in their times of need.
That's really cool that you guys go the extra mile like that. As far as the long term medical care rehabilitation, what is most common in refinery injury cases?
Well, the most common or the bumps and the most common you will find are generally going to be workers' comp type claims. That's your most common claim out there. That's, oh, I'm walking along, didn't have my hard hat on, and I wasn't paying attention, and I had a rack clip me in the forehead. Actually had a call on one of those last week. Um, there's no negligence involved, probably on your part for not wearing your hard hat. But in other instances wherever it's outside of comp, it's that's where we get into the more catastrophic type of cases. And at the end of the day, yes, our firm looks at everything. We try to work with everybody. We try to create partnerships with workers that may not even have a claim at the time, but we traditionally deal in catastrophic injuries, not just death, but severe injuries, the injuries that require severe hospitalization, months, maybe even years of physical therapy. And I mean, there was a burn case that we finished up in December. Even though the case finished, my now former client is going in and out of hospitals, and believe it or not, uh, when they're down in Houston, we make sure we still take them, make sure they get to the hospital, and we take them to the hospital, and our crew is part of still taking care of them even after they've been settled out and even though they've been paid.
How often is there a short term payout versus a true recovery plan that actually supports a family for the long haul? And how does your approach and strategy dictate that?
My approach and strategy is to tell everybody, do not sign a damn thing whenever they come visit you while you're grieving, while you're going through whether or not it's the loss of a spouse or loved one, or whether or not it's a severe injury that has made them unable to be able to talk to these folks. Don't sign anything. Please don't sign anything. Please do everything you can not to make any recorded statements, especially whenever you're in the situation you're in. And usually it's the folks that are most scared are usually the family. It's not the worker. The worker is either gone or severely out of it at the time. So the worry then falls 100% on significant others and children and relatives, sometimes friends. And that's where I like to tell folks, we don't like to think about our demise. We don't like to think about us being injured in any way. But that's the whole making the plan thing. hey, if something happened to me out here this week, um, make sure I want you to call this person. I want you to make sure you have your shit lined up a little bit. I
Yeah.
mean, excuse my French, but have your stuff lined up a little bit. Um, prepare for something. I mean, every day that we go out and we're safe, we're probably closer to a day that we're not safe. That's
Mhm.
just process of elimination and mathematics. So it's always good to save for that rainy day, and that rainy day could happen, and we never know when it is going to rain.
Yeah, and especially when you're working in a place a space like that where it's inherently extremely dangerous. Yeah, that
That's
makes a
right.
lot of
And
sense.
and you don't have control over what's going on next to you. You don't
Right.
have control over that crew over here. All you have control over is yourself, and
Right.
you're relying upon everybody else to be doing the right thing, and oftentimes that doesn't happen.
When injuries require, long-term care, lost wages and stuff like that, do you work directly with life care planners or economists to kind of show the real cost of an injury over time to help get that care that your clients need?
Absolutely. That's part of the expert group that we always bring in. And yes, we always bring in a top flight economist. We always bring in various experts, and we brought up life care plan. That December case that we were talking about, that ended up being a $55 million life care plan.
Wow.
And so I'm not qualified to put something like that together. That's why we go out and hire experts. And so we go out and hire the expert, and they put together a life care plan. And that was a big part of us being able to settle that case, and not actually having to try the case. And I mean, we were actually wanting to go try the case, but at the end of the day, under the law and the limits within the law, they got about the maximum that any court would be able to give them. And so there was no way I could say you can't take that. I said, heck yes, please take that. And everybody ended up doing very well, and justice was definitely served in that instance.
Hmm. We talked about in the past about how workers, especially in these places in refineries and plants and stuff, they pride themselves on being tough. They push through pain all the time because you're always a little beat up or something. It's a hard job to do. Does that mindset make the legal case harder? Do you see it make their recovery harder?
I think the answer initially would be yes. I think, and why I say yes initially is oftentimes those guys don't necessarily want to talk about every single thing that is hurting on them, and they're I hurt my arm, I hurt my leg, I hurt my back, whatever I hurt, and they kind of stop there. So in the beginning, yes, it does inhibit the exposure of the full medical class of what they're going through. But as the case goes on, actually, those are some of my most. I love those guys. Those guys, because they're going to get up in front of a jury, and those guys are going to get in front of that jury, and they're not going to BS that jury. They're going to they're black and white type of folks. They're gonna be straight with the jury. The jury's going to be probably a black and white type of jury, and they're going to it's that's another reason why they're my most favorite clients, is because trying their case, one of our biggest fears is getting a client to go in there and to overblow and embellish their case. Those guys never do that.
Hmm.
And we let the jury essentially feel that, and the jury can embellish the case if they want to.
You've represented people, obviously. We've talked about whose lives were completely changed overnight. What moments stand out to you when a client finally starts to see hope again? When they realize perhaps that their future isn't completely bleak, their lives aren't over.
And we do the very best we can through the litigation process to make it as smooth as possible, to make them as comfortable as possible, to make sure they're getting all the medical care that they need, not just what we need for the lawsuit, what they actually need. It never really gets easier for them until we resolve the case either through a settlement or through trial. And It's all, yes, they will calm down through the litigation, the 2 or 2+ years of litigation that we generally have to go through. And but one thing we do is we have folks that we partner with. I call them vendors. They're not vendors. They actually turn out to be essentially partners in working as a group to uplift these injured workers and their families, and to make their lives at the best quality it possibly can while they're undergoing what they're undergoing. And so we make sure nobody's going to starve to death. We make sure nobody's going to lose their house. We make sure nobody's losing cars. So we will bring in not just medical professionals. We will bring in financial professionals, and they devise a plan to help these folks actually make it while their cases are pending. And these folks will come in, and they're not really associated with us. We know them from using them and working with them, just like the life care plan folks. We don't always use the same folks, but yes, we try to holistically treat our clients. We understand the litigation process. Our clients generally don't understand the litigation process. So we try to make it as painless as possible throughout the process, and then make sure there's no significant losses in their personal lives.
Yeah. Wow, definitely some heavy stuff and some dense topics, but thank you, Brooks, for kind of walking us through all that. And thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Refinery Injury Podcast with Brooks Harrison. If you or a loved one is living with a life-changing injury from a refinery or plant accident, visit refineryinjury.com to learn how Brooks and his team help families rebuild their futures. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, share, leave a review so more refinery workers can find the help that they deserve. Brooks, it's always great chatting with you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been my pleasure.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.